Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murderer. This is Jeff Jones. With me today is the partial panel. We'll start from the top and say hello to Big Jeff. Welcome back, Big Jeff. Nice to see you.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me back. Sure appreciate it. Uh, you know, it finally feels like we're getting close to the end, even though we may not finish until Christmas. But even given that, I do feel like the show is sort of winding down. We know that episode 10 is just sort of everybody moping around a little bit. Um, there is a little bit of sadness, especially because we just know what's coming and the bitter disappointment of what's going to happen to Brendan. But that doesn't mean that the panel's running out of energy, I don't think, and we are raring to go and rip the state a new one. So let's get to it.
All right. I like how you set the tone there, Big Jeff. And Kel, welcome back. How are you doing? Good morning.
Good morning. It's lovely to be back. Life's been pretty hectic for me. I've had some major changes in terms of my rostering and birthdays, and I'm now gone. My kids have gone back to their sports, so life's pretty hectic. But yeah, it's always a pleasure to be back with the boys, and yeah, I'm excited to see. I did watch the last few weeks of you guys going on, so I see that you didn't really get far into it, but a lot of discussion, which is always healthy and great. So it's going to be awesome to pick up and join in.
Well, Dr. Silkman, I think that she just called us slow.
Well, actually, considering we did about 2 minutes, and I blame Big Jeff. He slowed us all down. Nah, it's great to be
throw
here.
the bait at him, sure.
Well, I mean, Big Jeff, he does fantastic closing remarks, and now he does fantastic opening remarks as well, which is awesome. All jokes aside, it's great to be here. Yes, we're going to be covering some material that's going to be very hard to take in, but we do it for the boys. And thank you, Jeff Jones, for inviting me back. And I'd like to say a warm welcome to everyone on the panel and everyone in chat. It's great to be here. Let's get on with it, guys.
We don't have nothing to do with this, and the judges are starting to see this now. We got some good judges who can see that Brandon's been coerced and been set up. They trying to coerce everybody to say whatever it is. As long as it fits their stories, it's good. And the federal courts are starting to realize that there's something wrong.
In my experience, when you have several defendants but one crime, when a case begins to collapse for one defendant, it has benefits of collapsing the other case. And having a federal court of appeals, one step below the U.S. Supreme Court, concur that this confession was involuntary, but go further and talk about the factual underpinning of this case. And the court described it as a litany of inconsistencies.
There's just one thing ringing in my... Oh, go ahead, Dr. Silkman. Go ahead.
I think I jumped in a bit too quick. Actually, what Kathleen Zorner said really hit the nail on the head. And this now explains why Brad Schimmel was so insistent in making sure that Brendan Dassey never got released. And it's pretty obvious why, because Kathleen Zorner stated quite clearly that if a judge can actually see that Brendan Dassey's confession was coerced, and in essence, he made it up. He made up a lot of the major elements of what allegedly occurred to Teresa Halbach. It could potentially have a flow-on effect to Stephen Avery, right? So once one of the cards is removed from a stack, then potentially the whole deck can fall down. Brad Schimmel was no dummy. He understood the significance of what was occurring, and he acted accordingly. It's truly disgusting.
Yeah, what I was going to say, I was going to add is that Big Jeff, last week you brought up such a good question, and I don't know if that we've really had it answered, so I think it's worth posing again, and that is kind of spurs off of what you just said, Dr. Silkman. Like, and I don't know the legal answer, but would that confession being overturned have any effect on what Big Jeff said last week on the warrant and the conviction? Because if you throw out the confession, it's everything after that gets tossed out. I think so. That's an open question in my mind. I haven't spoken to a lawyer or anyone who's. Do you guys? Is it still open, or have we had an answer on that?
It's a very interesting point, because if the judge tosses out Brendan Dassey's so-called coerced confession, remember there are two major forensic items that came out of Brendan Dassey's confession. The hood latch swab, right? Remember, the investigators were not aware and didn't even think about swabbing the hood latch. And also we have another critical item, and that is item FL, the bullet fragment that allegedly contained Teresa Halbach on it. So hence, it's rather bizarre that when Brendan didn't have legal representation, he didn't have an adult with him. If Judge Duffin is now saying, look, this confession is coerced, it's useless, you guys overstepped the mark, then how does one explain how the hood latch swab and item FL ever got introduced in Stephen's court case? Now, the interesting thing that Mr. Kratz did, and I'm sure Kelly and Big Jeff will back me up, is that he completely bypassed Brendan Dassey in Stephen Avery's trial. So he had two separate trials. Hence, why would you have fruit from the poison tree? That's the only question I ask. How come item FL and the hood latch swab got introduced into Stephen's trial, into Stephen's case, when Brendan Dassey was never called as a witness?
Well, and I just have go ahead, Big.
Well, I was just going to say it's 100% correct. You see guilters on Reddit all the time saying that Brendan's testimony was never used. They didn't use anything regarding Brendan's confession in Stephen's trial. And what Dr. Silkman just said, sort of blows that nonsense out of the water. That they clearly used the important items of evidence that were miraculously discovered, emphasis on miraculously, after the coerced confession. So that's just a load of crap. And I love how the judges are really almost poking nonsense. When you say how do they put it? A litany of inconsistencies. I mean, that is very strong language coming from a judge. A litany of inconsistencies. They're saying this is a load of crap, and the ruling that they're being asked to make is, whether any reasonable judge, any reasonable judge or jury, could have gotten this wrong, and if the answer is there's no way they should have got it wrong, then that's how this court is supposed to act. And now 2 times in a row, with Judge Duffin and now a 3-judge panel, has ruled that, that there's no way a reasonable jurist should have seen this a different way. And that is an impressive result. So I guess we keep watching to find out what happens, unfortunately.
I wanted to just kind of frame this in a hypothetical just for a quick, and if you guys care to comment, great. If not, we'll just let it dissolve into the ether. But would Stephen's post-conviction case been stronger if that Brendan Dassey confession had been thrown out and he was released? And if so, how much stronger?
What we have here is a very unique situation whereby we have the one victim, Teresa Halbach, we have 2 separate trials, and we have 2 different murder scenarios, right? In one case, Teresa Halbach was murdered in Stephen Avery's trailer. In another case, Teresa Halbach was murdered in Stephen Avery's garage. So how can you possibly have one victim, two different murder scenarios? It really is truly staggering when one thinks about it. And the other disturbing point was that there was evidence that many of the jurors from Stephen Avery's case attended Brendan Dassey's when he was sentenced. They went to the court to find more information about what happened. Now, isn't that remarkable that you've got a situation whereby the jurors in Stephen Avery's case had no idea what Brendan Dassey was being tried for? That's truly remarkable when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. So just to answer Jeff's question, and just to be clear, you're saying if the thrown out by this three-judge panel had stood, or if it had been thrown out in the beginning when it belonged, like there had never been.
No, I mean, if this, let's say it swings the other way in this part of the documentary that we're watching, whether the three-judge panel ruling stands. I don't know if that, whatever, let's just say that was stood, Brendan is released.
Yeah, I think
for Stephen, I think it does a lot, but I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, you know.
Yeah, I agree. Right, and let's not take it from the legal perspective. Let's just take it from just sort of the court of public opinion perspective, because the court of public opinion matters, right? Making a Murder got 25 million views on Netflix, and a similar number for Making a Murder 2. Kathleen Zellner, whether she realizes it or not, has a tremendous platform, and she can stand on the shoulders of millions of people to shout. And had Brendan, the confession, been thrown out as it should have been, that's going to give her a reason to scream from the rooftops, and people are going to want to see Making a Murderer 3. But because of this, and they're going to have a very close eye on the shenanigans of the Court of Appeals. But as it stands, Brendan's confession fell by the wayside, and Kathleen Zellner sort of bypassed opportunities she had to move forward at the federal level on some of the things that I thought were her best claims. So I think it would have definitely amplified the platform, because people are outraged after Making a Murder, and rightly so. And Brendan's release would have amplified the volume for, hey, look, what everybody knows that Brendan said was crap. Kratz obviously used it on March 1st to poison public opinion, and to increase the number of charges against Stephen Avery, all of which were dropped. Put the kibosh on the property bond. A whole bunch of stuff resulted from that March 1st teleconference. Most of that court of public opinion kind of stuff. It's a very powerful thing, and it would have helped Stephen in a tremendous way. So that's my opinion.
If I could just add to what Big Jeff said, I agree wholeheartedly, except I think, and I'd like to hear Kelly's comment on this, I think I know the way the state would go. The state will simply say, well, all the forensic evidence points to Stephen, right? So Stephen has got a shopping list of forensic evidence put against him. Now, one can argue, as Kathleen Zellner said, about certain forensic evidence being planted, and there's very, very good evidence of that. But it will always boil down to one thing, and that is the presence of Stephen Avery's blood in the RAV4. And that opens up bigger questions. Exactly how did that RAV4 get there? How did Stephen's blood get there?
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. It's the what coulda, shoulda, woulda in this situation. We don't know what it would have changed, what sliding doors could have occurred. But I do agree with Dr. Silkman's last statement in terms of, in hindsight, what we know now, if it had been overturned and Brendan Dassey had been released, I personally don't think it would have rippled effect Stephen Avery too much. I think on a platform like Big Jeff was expressing with Kathleen Zellner, and the ripples of reasonable doubt, and kind of throw all that up would be effective. But I think the courts would have just buckled down and tightened in more on Stephen. Especially now when we actually have them, a lot of people, especially the state now, will say, well, we actually think Brendan should be out, but Stephen should remain in. So I think they would have eventually got over that loss and just still kind of kind of like tightened in and buckled in on Stevens even harder, just to make sure that didn't, affect anything on him. And it really does come down to this as well. Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey were both tried separately, and in hindsight, they didn't need Brendan Dassey to be successful in prosecuting Stephen. He was found guilty on all charges. So and like Dr. Silkman said, it was in their opinion, a very strong forensic case. Okay, if Brendan kind of got thrown out, maybe they would have had to drop item FL and the hood latch, but it would have come back to that blood. And it's, how did it get there? When did it get there? And without, the possibility of pointing to a Denny or any other people, you are made to believe by the prosecution that it's Stephen Avery.
And I think that that's my overriding point, is that they knew early on. I think that they tried them separately early because they had strategic reasons for that. And I think that this just continues in their strategy, whether right or wrong.
And the other point, of course, guys, as we know, is that Brendan Dassey had admitted that he had gone over and helped Stephen pick up items from the around the salvage yard, make a small little fire, help clean up the garage, and then he went home. So the issue really for the state, and that's why I believe they tried so hard to keep Brendan where he is that we mustn't forget that Brendan Dassey was Stephen Avery's alibi, right? Now, the state can argue, all right, maybe Stephen Avery maybe hid Teresa Hallbach somewhere and her RAV4 and then committed the crimes. Do you understand? So hence they can argue that, okay, Teresa Hallbach was murdered when Brendan Dassey was absent, right? Because as Kelly said, the state were basically trying to separate Brendan from Stephen. And if you notice, all the forensic evidence initially all pointed to Stephen Avery. There was no forensic evidence that early on pointed to anybody else, including Brendan Dassey. So Brendan Dassey walked into the bear trap himself, right? And he admitted to all these things. However, common sense shows that what Brendan stated to the investigators was complete, utter rubbish. It could not be backed up, not by science or even by forensic evidence. And if I could just make the comment very quickly, Tom Fassbender and I'm sure Mark Wiegert knew that on the night of November the 5th, a cadaver dog called Brutus went in Stephen Avery's trailer. The cadaver dog never alerted in Stephen Avery's master bedroom. This is the very bedroom that all the mayhem allegedly took place with Teresa Hallbach. A cadaver dog has an extremely sensitive sense of smell. It detects human decomposition. It never alerted in the master bedroom, right? You can clean, and I'm sure you guys will back me up, you can clean as much as you want, but you're never going to be able to clean every drop of blood and other forms of human decomposition. A cadaver dog is going to pick it up. And just to prove the point, Brutus alerted in Stephen Avery's bathroom. And we know that there were small droplets of his own blood in the bathroom. So hence, they knew, the investigators knew on November the 5th, there was no hit by a cadaver dog in Stephen Avery's master bedroom. And furthermore, Brendan Dassey got the orientation of the bedroom completely wrong. So there were elements to his story that made no sense at all. So the question must be, why did the state persist, and why were they so aggressive to make sure Brendan never got released? And I think part of the answer is Brendan was Stephen's alibi. And yes, it potentially could make the case against Stephen stronger for him, but unfortunately, we're never going to find out now.
Color, fires that began and ended at different times, bloody crime scenes without a trace of blood remaining, metal handcuffs that left no marks on the bedpost. Dassey's story changes. He backtracks. Officers try to pin him down on timeframes and details, but they are like waves on the sand. Even the state has trouble telling its version of the timeline of the story in any cogent manner due to the fact that it changed with each retelling. What you see between the majority and the dissent that was written, the dissent, I think, is premised on the view that Dassey is absolutely guilty. The dissenting judge, Judge Hamilton, says Dassey's confession appears to have been the product of a guilty conscience, coaxed rather gently from him with standard, non-coercive investigative techniques. Even assuming, however, that the majority's interpretation is plausible, our job as a federal court reviewing a state conviction under 2254D is not to consult scholarly literature in search of new best practices. Really, why not? Why would you not be availing yourself of what experts have determined about false confessions? The state ought to consider the fact that something could happen to Brendan Dassey in prison because other inmates tend to be very jealous. I mean, my clients, even when they know they're going to be released, don't tell people. This case, with the publicity, a lot of other inmates know that he has a good chance of going home and they don't. So every single minute that someone like Brendan Dassey's in prison is a threat to their life. And so leaving him in there when there's absolutely no excuse for it, their cases collapsed, they lost, they need to just step up and take responsibility for the pathetic case against him and let him out.
I think it also highlights a major issue in the criminal justice system. You heard Kathleen Zellner basically spell out why Judge Hamilton thought that there was no coerced confession and that Brendan Dassey did indeed help his uncle Stephen Avery murder Teresa Horbach and ended up cremating her. It really is frightening how there is such a disparity in people's opinions. You know, you basically have the other two judges saying, no, this is a coerced confession. It's absolute garbage. And yet Judge Hamilton said, no. The police did nothing wrong. The judgment's got to stand. You know, he's guilty. I know everyone has an opinion, but jeepers, what is scary here is that what the judges come up with can either have you released from prison or keep you in prison. That's how important these decisions are. And the mere fact that Judge Hamilton said, hey, we're not meant to consult scholarly literature in search of new best practices. Well, you know, the question must be asked, is Wisconsin in the Stone Age, right? Quite clearly, things change dramatically. I used to be in the field of recombinant DNA, molecular biology. These techniques change on a weekly basis, you know? And so why can't a judge consider the opinions of experts that look at these things, that look at coerced confessions, to see that someone of Brendan Dassey's ilk is very prone to the Reed technique. It simply boggles the mind that Judge Hamilton would not even have considered any aspects of what academics, researchers, professors have now come up with. It truly is mind-blowing, guys.
Did the majority opinion actually consult wrongful conviction literature? Is that cited in the majority opinion?
I know, I think it was Richard Leo. I have to double check, but I think he was consulted as well, because he wrote. Yes, in fact, he was quoted in the summary by Circuit Judge Rovner. He actually mentioned, she actually mentioned Richard Leo. Now, Richard Leo, he is considered as an expert on false confessions. So his name was actually mentioned. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but wasn't he called up in Brendan Dassey's trial? I'll have to double check. But certainly his name was mentioned.
So the question that I would pose to the to the panel and maybe to the chat is, we now know that the developers of the Reed technique highly dissuade use of the Reed technique against intellectually disadvantaged people of a certain age, particularly Brendan's age. Would you consider that a scholarly resource, or would you consider that sort of just a practical rule of thumb? That's my question.
Well, it's common sense, right? With any technique that is used, there are always going to be pros and cons. What is scary here, guys, is that the actual developer of the Reed technique even stated it in black and white. Hey, you got to show caution here, because certain individuals, the Reed technique is not going to work really well on them. But furthermore, it has the potential to solicit a false confession. Now, that's the gentleman who invented the Reed technique. You don't have to go to any scholarly literature or another professor. This is the guy that actually invented the technique, and he gave a warning.
So this just tells you what you can think about the minority opinion, right? The dissenting opinion, which is he's trying to sort of gaslight us into thinking that this is sort of highfalutin BS psychology, when in reality we have the developer of the technique telling us something different, and it's not related to highfalutin BS psychology, which I've had enough of myself in certain instances. And I'm not referring to this one, but he is just flat out wrong on the facts. Right? This has nothing to do with that. This is the damn developer of the technique saying this, and I'm sure he must have done it after, probably after Brendan and a couple of other people confessed. I wouldn't be surprised if he cited this case. And also, isn't this case cited in Delivery? When they train people how to do the Reed technique as an example of how not to do it.
That's correct.
You have just you can just completely pick apart the minority opinion here, the dissenting opinion, just from the simple things that we know, that have happened since since this was made. And it's just outrageous that is still in prison for this, when there's just so much piled up against it. These judges in the en banc panel should be ashamed of themselves. I don't know how they sleep at night.
100% correct. I know I remember, and it was shown in MAM, how Laura Nyrider and Stephen Drizzen actually did speaking tours, in which they actually highlighted all the errors that were made when Brendan Dassey gave his so-called coerced confessions. And they went through it step by step. And, it's rather remarkable that you've got many academics, you've got university professors who actually use this as an example of what not to do. But we mustn't forget one important point. Unfortunately, Brendan Dassey, what happened to Brendan Dassey is not unique. It has happened to many others of his ilk. So he's not the first, and he won't be the last person to give a false confession. There are many people in prison who've been in prison for 10, 20, 30 years based on false confessions. And it's not until forensic evidence comes to light many years later that find the true perpetrator. And what is rather disturbing in this case, guys, is there's actually no forensic evidence tying Brendan to Teresa Halbach, right? You cannot associate Brendan to Teresa Halbach, right? So you've got all this forensic evidence against Stephen. But what is of concern is that the state are saying that Brendan Dassey assisted his uncle in doing all these horrible things, raping, dismemberment, cremation, and yet how come Brendan Dassey never left any incriminating forensic evidence of himself, implicating himself in the murder of Teresa Halbach? They haven't even found anything to do with Brendan in the RAV4, only pointing to Stephen Avery. Something is not right here with the narrative, guys. The state surely must know that.
Oh, even Mr. Crack said you can't erase somebody, right? Isn't that what he said? There has to be trace of somebody somewhere. You just can't erase somebody.
Well, that's 100%. That's 100% correct. Except, of course, Mark Wiegert made that flippant remark about why there was a lack of forensic evidence inside Stephen Avery's master bedroom, even though they took it completely apart. Is the only thing he could say was, well, they had 5 days to clean up. That's the only explanation a co-lead investigator in a murder case can say. Now, I'm sure Kelly can comment and others can comment. I'll tell you what, it's going to be pretty difficult for two guys of Brendan and Stephen's ilk to be able to forensically expunge what allegedly happened in that master bedroom, right? There's always going to be a piece of hair, a piece of tissue, some blood, urine, you name it. The investigators tore the place apart. They took the wood paneling, they took the bed apart, they even cut the carpet up. They found no evidence of Teresa Halbach. Now, if you look at it from a forensic standpoint, and you look at it from what the cadaver dog, Brutus, failing to alert, you will conclude, you have to conclude, that Teresa Halbach was never in Stephen Avery's trailer. Because remember, the cadaver dog went over his entire place. The cadaver dog only hit in Stephen Avery's bathroom area, where it got shown that he had bled on November the 3rd, and he had droplets of blood in his bathroom sink and other places. So all the forensic evidence completely exonerates at least Brendan Dassey. So what the hell is that kid doing in prison? Just based on words.
We begin with breaking news. Today, Brendan Dassey's attorneys filed a motion to have their client released from jail immediately.
And this after yesterday's decision by an appeals court panel affirming a federal judge's ruling to overturn Dassey's conviction.
The lawyers today say that Brendan Dassey has spent 4,137 days in prison in violation of the Constitution of the United States.
Basically, what we're asking the court to do is to let him out, while the lawyers continue to fight over his case, to not make him wait behind bars while the legal wrangling continues. Basically said, hold on, let's not let him out of prison yet, let's let this appeal proceed. Well, you know what? This appeal has proceeded. So we filed our motion as soon as we possibly could, saying, unlock those prison doors, let him out. He has waited 7 months for this appeal to proceed. Now it's done. It's time.
People keep on asking me if I'm going to move out of Wisconsin after I get out.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll have to see once I get home.
Yeah.
You know,
Don't answer that question.
yeah, because I can't say that I'm going to move over right away because I probably won't be able to leave Wisconsin.
Right.
Unless I get permission.
Right.
Which is kind of stupid.
Yeah, especially if somebody's innocent, they shouldn't have you going through that.
Yeah.
Hey Jeff, I mean, if I could have a go back and maybe even edit this to put after the end of the previous segment, just think about how outrageous this is, right? I mean, so if you're keeping score, right? You go back and you see the last two judgments for Brendan are that his confession was forcibly obtained. It was not given willingly. He sits in prison. As he's sitting there innocent because his trial, his conviction was completely based on that. As Dr. Silkman eloquently said, there was no forensic evidence against him. Only reason he's in jail is because of his own words that just got tossed out. And now he has to, even with nothing against him, right? His conviction for all practical purposes overturned. They're saying he's got to stay, he has to appeal to the state to let him out of prison. There's something wrong with that. I mean, when I check the scorecard, he's innocent. His confession's been thrown out. They have no basis upon which to uphold this conviction. He should be out. And the fact that he didn't get to taste breathe the free air is just disgusting the way that they handled it. What danger is he? You've seen the things. We know what he does. He colors. He sends Laura Nightrider colored pictures that he colors. This is a dangerous person. This is the dangerous psychopath that they need to keep locked up. Who the one thing he's done wrong is prison, has stolen a little extra food, brought it back to his cell. Are you fucking kidding me? That he's a big danger to society? Who the hell do they think they're kidding? This is just unbelievable. What the wrong that they did to this kid. This always happens when they get going on Brendan. I just get fired up and I can't help myself. It's just not right. Who is with me on this? It's just unbelievably wrong.
Completely. And when you think about it, you have Judge Duffin, who tossed out the confession, said, "Look, guys, you made so many mistakes here. This is useless." Then 2 out of 3 Seventh Circuit Court judges said, "Nah, this is garbage." So the scorecard is 3-1. If you're talking about scorecards, right? You got a judge, an independent judge, and 2 other Seventh Circuit judges saying, "Mate, this is rubbish." Now, the mere fact that they kept him in prison and didn't release him, that's purely 100% political. 100% political. And now we're going to see the machinations of Brad Schimmel, and what he says is truly disgusting.
What can you tell us about Mr. Dassey?
Nothing. You can't even have a camera in here.
Oh, okay. Is he going to be released today?
No, they didn't tell me that.
Do you see what's on the screen now? All those reporters? That's exactly what Brad Schimmel feared was going to happen, right? So in other words, Brendan Dassey walking out of prison, he's going to be barraged by news reporters. They're going to ask questions. And you could imagine Brendan Dassey can either keep his mouth shut or open up and tell them how things went down. And this is going to ultimately look really bad for the state, right? And for the criminal justice system. Could you imagine if they released Brendan Dassey? It meant that the judge, the jury, the investigators got it all wrong. And what does Big Jeff say all the time in Kelly? Protection of the verdicts at all costs.
Within the last 30 minutes, the state moved to keep one of Wisconsin's most notorious convicted killers behind bars.
In today's filing, the state argued Dassey should remain behind bars, saying his release would jeopardize public safety.
Dassey's attorneys say they already have a transition plan for him to move back into the community if he should get his way.
There was a chance that Brendan Dassey could have been released today from Columbia Correctional, but the state filed a motion only a half hour before the deadline that prevented that from happening today. In the motion, the state says it plans to appeal Dassey's overturned conviction, and therefore he should stay behind bars while the process plays out. Dassey's lawyers say they will file a formal reply to the state. Now, his lawyers say that he should be released by the end of the day tomorrow, but that decision lies in the hands of the courts. We will continue to bring you all updates on this developing story.
I mean, how can anyone justify using a 16-year-old kid as a political football, you know, to save face so that you don't look bad? And notice how they vilified Brendan Dassey, that if you release Brendan Dassey, he's going to be a danger to the public. What on earth are they thinking? What on earth is Brendan Dassey going to do, right? And it goes to show the utter desperation and complete stupidity by adults that seemingly are intelligent and experienced, and their care factor for Brendan and his family is absolute zero. Jeff, I just wanted to make the comment. This is why Ma'am 1 and 2 was such a brilliant series, because it showed you the reality. It showed you not only the reality, but the brutality of the criminal justice system. It showed you the machinations that were happening behind the scenes, how if someone is wrongfully convicted, all the hoops that one must go through, all the legal wrangling that must be done, all the deadlines that have to be met, all because the Attorney General believes that releasing Brendan Dassey, he's going to be a danger to society. And that's why I believe that this is so valuable. We get to see the human side. That's very important.
I think part of that human side too is if you take a look at what's going on, right? We have the lawyers from the Wisconsin Innocence Project, including Stephen Drizzen and Laura Nyrider, clearly working to the point of mental and physical exhaustion to file this brief. I'd like to know how many pages it was. I bet it wasn't that many, 5, 10 pages, something like that, to refute the state's points. And look at how they're racking themselves. They understand an innocent boy's life is on the line. And look at Stephen Drizzen. He's on the damn ground, isn't he? Just trying to recoup whatever rest he can, or trying to just force his brain to think of something, the right way to word this phrase, the right thing to say, the right tactics, strategic tactics to make the argument. It is, if you're ever in prison, there's somebody like this that you want on your side. If you want somebody working for you, and somebody with this type of dedication that you want working for you. To me, what tremendous integrity this shows, to just be racking yourself to this level of exhaustion, and sort of the point where physically you're laying on the damn floor. You're not going to find me on the floor, unless I got a few belts in me. But it hasn't been drinking like I like to.
Yep, but and that's a really good point there, Big Jeff. But at the end of the day, how do you combat stupidity, right? How do you combat stupidity? How do you write down an argument to combat common sense that everyone should really understand? Why must it take all these attorneys to come up with all these clever strategies to combat, in essence, what is stupidity? You're losing from the get-go. It really is a terrible, terrible situation, guys.
Submit. Let's see if it's been accepted.
Okay.
It's done.
File.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Good.
Now the wiki.
Okay.
Good night. Thanks for everything.
No problem. I'll be there tomorrow.
See you later.
Defense attorneys for Brendan Dassey have filed a response to the state's motion seeking to keep Dassey in prison. In today's filing, Dassey's attorneys called the state's effort an extraordinary step to prevent releasing an unconstitutionally incarcerated man, despite 2 written opinions overturning his conviction.
How is that wrong? All right. She just said it very succinctly. How is that wrong? It's exactly right. 2 written opinions overturning the conviction. It doesn't get much harder than that. But yet they have to keep him in prison, because if he gets out and starts squawking, that's that's going to tip over the apple cart in Wisconsin. They're not going to like that at all.
I mean, they don't want to give up anything at any corner, do they? Not at any turn. It's a full court press for everything since the property bond through. You know what I mean, right? It's just
that's right.
Everything.
Stephen Avery needed to go away. It all goes back to 1985.
But we're kind of still on the loop. Like we're seeing the patterns, because it's still, as of today, even in Stephen's case, it's still that tug of war between, and I think, my apology, I think it was Dr. Silkman or even Big Jeff that said it first. Excuse me, it's the politics. You are literally now fighting the politics side of it. And it's just like back and forth, back and forth.
Okay. What's Kasha's done?
Hey, Bob. I just got it. So we are gonna go call Barb right now. All right, so.
And that breaking news is in the Brendan Dassey case. The convicted killer will remain behind bars for now.
The State Department of Justice argued that Dassey should remain behind bars during the appeal process, and the court agreed.
How many mom and pops who were sitting around the kitchen table who knew nothing about this case, was like, oh my, what a great guy that Brad Schimmel is. I can't believe this notorious murderer was about to get out. And boy, he really saved us from that happening. Boy, was that a close one. It just makes me sick to think about the gaslighting, lying, corrupt media, and what they did and the way that they talk and how they're more interested in ratings than actual news. It's all just a hill of beans.
Well, one day Brad Schimmel's going to meet his maker, and I'll tell you what, he better bring a good 5-point plan with him, because the Lord up above is going to ask a couple of very tough questions, either the Lord up above or Satan himself. Because remember, at the end of the day, I know I was being flippant, but this guy here at that time had Brendan Dassey's life and freedom in his hands, right? He was so terrified of releasing Brendan that he pulled out all stops to keep him behind bars. One has to ask why. Has it got anything to do with Stephen Avery? Has it got the fact that you've got one of the most successful attorneys overturning wrongful convictions on the hot trails of Stephen Avery and his case? Are they terrified that both Stephen and Brendan eventually are going to be exonerated and released? Is it going to cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars in civil suits? I don't know. But at the end of the day, imagine being yourself in the same position as Brad Schimmel, the life of a kid in his hands. And what does he default to? Well, let's have a listen to what he defaults to. This will just blow your mind.
What's your next move?
Well, our next move, we'll seek a review by the entire Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. It's called an en banc review of all the judges. There are 9, and filing that motion will stay the proceedings from the 3-judge panel, and we'll wait that out. You get the panels given to you randomly, and you don't know what you're going to get. We drew a panel that we knew was going to be a tougher one to prevail in front of.
But ultimately here,
you've just seen how corruption works right there. That's the definition of corruption right there. And I'll tell you why. He is the Attorney General. And these are people which are appointed to do a job on a panel. These are people who are experts in their area. He was not prepared to accept the decision of the umpire, of the judicial system. And you know what he said? They're handed to you in a random fashion. So you trying to tell me that people go to prison or don't go to prison all because of a random decision? Is that the way America runs its criminal justice system, whereby the Attorney General is almost got tears in his eyes saying, oh, well, you don't know who you're going to get. If you don't trust those individuals to do the right thing, what on God's earth are they doing as a judge or on an en banc panel. This is truly the most stupidest thing. Kathleen Zona must be hearing this and her head must be spinning, right? So you don't even trust the people that are appointed to come up with a decision. Guys, this is truly shocking.
I know Jack's not with us today, but I think I just heard his iPad smash. I mean, it's unbelievable.
If Jack were here, he'd be saying, and I know what his point is here. His point is, you know, typically when you go through the court system, you get one crack per tier, right? So you get a crack at, you know, Stephen started in the state, right? And he get at the trial court, he was convicted guilty. He went to the Court of Appeals. He lost, I should say Brendan, use Brendan as this example. The Court of Appeals, he lost. The state Supreme Court, he lost. Then you go to federal court, right? So this is the courts that have jurisdiction at the federal level over the whole United States, right? Or in their district, anyways. And he won at the sort of the one judge level. Up to the next level is the three judge level. And Jack's point is, you lose at the three judge level, that should be it, because that's the way they do it. This whole en banc thing, because he didn't like the answer that he got, right? They go to this very rarely invoked en banc, and it's just outrageous. It's outrageous that the thing even exists in the first place. You don't like the answer you get? Oh yeah, we have the ability to change that if we get an answer that we don't like. The answer should be that you go to the Supreme Court of the United States of America if you lose the second round of federal court. Not this en banc bullshit, right? It's unbelievable that they even have the possibility to invoke it. And that is Jack's point. You should not get another shot at the well. It's just unbelievable that you do. For what reason? Right? What's the, you know, it doesn't even make any sense. They get 2 cracks at this level. Why don't they get 2 cracks at any other level? It just doesn't make any sense. It's corruption, right? If you don't like the answer you get, you know, you can, you know, the political wheels can start to turn. You can go to the judges who appointed you. They owe you political favors. Bam, you're done. Like I said, I don't know what is worse, an appointed judiciary or an elected judiciary, because, you know, both of them have their different masters, and it is not. At the end of the day, it does not end to be about fundamental fairness. It ends up to be about some type of you know, just some type of payola for political favor. And they call one in. This is a case where we want to fire a silver bullet, right? Because you need this one bad. I don't want to be the one to have Brendan Dassey lost. I mean, neither does the governor, right? It's so I don't know, or the Senate. Nobody. So it's just sickening to me. I'm all sorry. I'm just outraged about it.
No, not at all, Big Jeff. I mean, this is kind of the pinnacle point here in the Brendan side of this long drawn out case. And, you know, we've only got a couple episodes left of the series, and so this is really, if you're not outraged now, then when are you going to be? That's what I would say to everyone in chat. If this doesn't outrage you now, what is it going to take to make you outraged to understand that? And it is unfortunate Jack can't be here, but I'm with you on that point, Big Jeff, where he said, you know, Jack is so determinant on that. Then either one or the other, either use the 3-judge panel or do everything en banc. But you can't just have this little trap door that you pull when you lose.
Yeah, but not only that, if I could just add, had Judge Duffin rejected the proposition that Brendan Dassey was coerced and said, no, the investigators did nothing wrong, I'll tell you right now that Brad Schimel would have come out with the media and saying, see, I told you we got it right. So isn't it amazing when a decision goes against the Attorney General's interest, he cries like a 2-year-old, right? But I'm sure that if the decision went for him, then everything is fine, everything is kosher, let's move on. A vicious killer is behind bars, we can all sleep at night. So it goes to show, and Big Jeff said it eloquently, it's political corruption, and we are seeing it coming out of the mouth of the Attorney General. This is truly shocking what we are hearing right now.
Here, do you think this will end in a new trial for Brendan Dassey?
Well, I don't. And if I thought that the federal district court was right in their decision, we wouldn't be pursuing the appeal. But we think the judge got it very wrong. What
Talk
happened
about
in
the
this
coercion,
right?
You know, how that interview with Brendan at that time.
Right. What happened in this case were fairly typical law enforcement methods of interviewing people, and certainly being in a law enforcement interview is coercive, just to any degree.
Did you see that slight smirk that came out of the corner of his mouth?
Duper's delight.
Yep, Duper's delight. I tell you, one day this guy's going to meet his maker, and he's going to have a lot to answer for. It truly is ridiculous. And he just admitted, oh yeah, a little bit of coercion, that's okay. So if the investigators are allowed to lie, put up false flags, for someone like Brendan Dassey, who has a trust in adults, what hope has that kid got? And the answer is zero. He was trying to be honest. They kept on telling him that he was lying. And look where he is now. Life in prison for something he never did.
But it has to be something that overbears someone's will, and we don't believe it got to that. Hopefully we'll get some finality this soon for Teresa Halbach's family.
You have to end every sentence with that, right? And the Halbach family. That's how you
100% correct. It's the classic fallback line of think of the victim, think of the families. Well, are you trying to tell me that no one ever in the history of the United States has ever been released because of wrongful imprisonment? There are people who are being exonerated on a weekly basis. Now, that means that they didn't commit that crime. Things went wrong. So why can't those axioms be relevant to Brendan Dassey? Why is Brendan Dassey the exception to the rule? That's the only question I ask.
Well, that question and many more questions will have to wait for next week. I'm glad that we did get through this section of the Brendan Dassey case, and it was the toughest part, I think, in the documentary is the actual finality of it and where we got to right today. So that brings us to wrap-up comments. So Big Jeff, if you wouldn't please take it away and give us your summation. I know Dr. Silkman has been waiting at least a week for it.
Well, this is another tough one, Jeff, because every time we see the injustices that were done to Brendan highlighted, it just gets your blood boiling. And it should get your blood boiling. It should get your blood boiling enough to do something about it. Hop on Discord. Talk to people about it. Talk to write letters to your elected officials. Post on Twitter. CC tag the governor of Wisconsin, Evers, and tell him to wake up because this kid does not belong in prison. This episode, you can tell why this series received so many views. It was very well made. It's a heart-wrenching episode. It's a roller coaster ride that brings you up and gives you hope that the right thing might actually happen, only to pull the rug out from under you, like Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown trying to kick it. It's just unbelievable what happened to this kid, and it's inconceivable to me that this can be done in the United States of America, especially with what we know now. And I think the panel did an excellent job talking about the challenges with the read technique, and to listen to Brad the asshole Schimmel sit there and say, "Oh, we don't think it went as far as coercion and control. We think it was just perfect." Of course, that idiot is going to say that. But keep in mind, the inventors of the technique said this is not appropriate for an intellectually challenged juvenile. The friggin' inventors said it's not appropriate. And this is Brad Schimmel talking out of his ass on television. I just go on to the next, because I'm quickly at a loss for words.
Oh, Jesus, guys. I think we broke Big Jeff. We're going to have to give him a break and let him repair himself before next episode. I'm with you there, Big Jeff. It is an outrage. It is a fantastic outrage. We've been going through this week after week with Brendan, and it's just been building and building and building. And it is just absolutely frustrating. I'm also at a loss for words, Big Jeff. But Dr. Silkman, maybe you can take over and give us your wrap up today.
Well, I didn't really enjoy today's episode because of the subject matter. I really do love the passion and the enthusiasm of our panel. It's really great to be part of this team here. Look, it really is a tragedy and a travesty. There's no two ways about it. When you think that Brendan Dassey is in prison for just his words with no forensic evidence is extremely frustrating. Even worse when the Attorney General, Brad Schimmel, made it his mission and agenda to make sure that one of the most dangerous criminals in Wisconsin remains behind bars due to public safety, is truly shocking. And I think what we have seen here is corruption at work. I have no words for it, and it really is very, very depressing. That's all I've got, and I've got to bring my iPad to the repair shop again. Thank you, guys, and thank you, everyone in chat.
I think you're going to end up buying that guy a new house, Dr. Silkman. But anyway, we're all in that position with frustration with this part of the case. And that brings us to Kel. Kel, if you wouldn't lead us out of this episode and give us your summation of today.
Well, this was definitely one of the worst parts to come back to. It's just the heart-wrenching cycle of Brendan Dassey's roller coaster in the system. It's never fun or not pleasurable to have to sit through and watch this again, and especially when we know the outcome. I think that's what gets us all, because it's not like we build ourselves up. It's like our inner conscious has that hope, but we know subconsciously as well that the outcome is what it is, and we already know it. It's never fun, and I got no words. I'm like Big Jeff, I've got no words, and I never do with Brendan. It's just one big hot mess. He should have been out the first moment it was overturned, and he should have remained out, and he should be out, and that's it.
Well, that is it, as they say, for us here at Discussing a Murderer. We will see you guys all next week with another episode. So for Big Jeff and Kel and Dr. Silkman, this is Jeff Jones saying this has been Discussing a Murderer.